Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live. I'm your host, Erin Urban. I'm an executive career accelerator coach, and what I do is I help driven, emerging, and evolving leaders like yourself remove remote blocks so you can achieve more impact, income, and influence. And today, we'll be talking about that influence part of developing your career, advancing yourself, promoting yourself, moving up the ladder, or just leveraging that inner brilliance. It's interesting. This morning I posted about inner brilliance and how most of us don't realize how much untapped potential we have inside of ourselves. And when it comes to influence, it's not just for those people who are quote unquote extroverts and lives of the party and the known people and the influencers. No, not at all. In fact, anyone can leverage their influence to not only better their lives and their careers, but grow themselves as an individual and tap into that inner brilliance. And today, to help us tap into the inner brilliance, we have a wonderful guest that I am thrilled to have on the show. Now, as you hop on the show, I want to make sure that I can welcome you. Come on in, join us, pull up a chair, be a part of the conversation as you hop on the Career Coffee Chat show today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are tuning in from around the world. Please say your name, say where you're from, say hi. Don't be shy. Ask your questions. We're here to help you thrive and tap into that inner brilliance and elevate your influence, no matter where you are in your life and your career. Now, also, I bet you would be interested to know that not only is influence available to everyone, and regardless of your work style and your personality type, but influence is the number one definitive marker of success. Now, Ed Krow, who is our exceptional guest this morning, who is a talent transformation expert for individuals and businesses looking to achieve massive growth, will be sharing exactly how to tap into that success element of influence. Now, Ed has helped hundreds of clients, including Fortune 500 companies, achieve talent and culture transformations. And you're here joining this morning to achieve a transformation too. Now, whether you are tuning in now or to the podcast later, please say hi, say where you're from, and don't be shy, ask your questions. Whether it's now or watching the replay later, we will see your comments and we will get to you. Or feel free to direct message us. Now, Ed is wonderful. I'm just so excited to have him on the show today. So I'd love to welcome Ed to the show. Hey, Ed.
Hey, Erin. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Good
I'm
to
really
be here.
excited to talk about influence because I think a lot of people misunderstand what it is, what it does, how they can tap into it. And I know for a fact there are millions of people who feel like they have absolutely no influence at all.
Yeah.
And that's not true, is it?
No, not at all. In fact, I was doing some digging in preparation for our call, and I found that most sociologists agree that the average person, so just folks like you and me and the folks tuning in, influence about 15,000 people in our lifetime.
Wow.
Right? I mean, so you start thinking about those kinds of numbers, and people say, "No way, Ed, I don't even know 15,000 people." And I say, well, no one says you have to know them, right? I mean, your influence could start like that flower seed, right? And it's one seed and it impacts one person, and that person goes on and blossoms and develops pollen and creates more seeds, and they hit more people, and so on, right? That's influence. It's that water rushing downhill kind of thing. And so absolutely, we've all got the potential in us to influence 15,000 people over the course of our lifetimes. And it's to me, that's an awesome responsibility, actually.
It is. And it's interesting when we think of influence as something, I don't know, it's kind of like the networking. Like network is this thing that you do, is the thing. No, it's really a part of your life if you do it correctly. The same thing with influence. Influence is this thing. It's this they elevate the level of significance around influence. And when anyone elevates the level of significance about anything, it feels less obtainable. It feels like it's out there when really it's right here with you every day. Yeah. And one of the reasons sociologists propose that individuals, even extremely introverted individuals who don't like to leave their home, and the pandemic was a wonderful time, they never left, they were great, even those individuals who don't like to go out in public will influence over 15,000 people in their lifetime, is because of those unlooked for moments.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. I was in the grocery store one day. This was pre-pandemic. I still go to the grocery store, by the way. But
Good. We don't want you going hungry.
I do go to the grocery store, but my husband, bless him, has helped me tremendously. He's been like, I'll go to the grocery store.
There you go.
Yay. I love my husband. He's wonderful. Anyway, so I was in the grocery store and watching this gentleman on the phone. You know how it is, Bluetooth. He's wrong. We're doing his groceries and talking to whomever's on the other end. And of course, everybody else is learning a lot about him that probably wanted to know. And he gets to the cashier and he's still talking to someone else. He's not paying attention to the cashier. The cashier is furniture. And of course, you can see the expression, right, on the cashier's face. Flip, what a jerk. Flip, I'm not paying attention. Flip, I'm just furniture. Flip, I mean, it's just that you know. And I get up there. He checks out, goes off, and does whatever. And I have decided that I'm glad I'm not dating anymore because that's what he was talking about. I was like, oh gosh, I'm married to a wonderful man. Anyway, so I get up there and I look at the cashier and go, how are you? How are you doing? Did you have a good weekend? And all of a sudden,
she lights up.
Yeah. Yep. That's influence.
Yep, absolutely it is.
It doesn't have to be this thing.
Nope.
So, Ed, what got you into focusing on influence? And I'll segue that by asking, we know it matters, but why do you feel is so important?
Two great questions. So my background is in human resources. And if you know anything about human resources, you know that they tend to be the redheaded stepchild, if you will, of the business world. You know, no one likes HR. And, you know, if you look at poor Toby on The Office, no one liked Toby. And you know, just HR's portrayal in the media is even just really, really bad. And honestly, a lot of that is deserved. And so, you know, as I've gone through my consulting career and I've realized that, you know, HR needs to have much more of an impact on an organization than it does. And of course, that needs to start with the HR people themselves. And so I originally started talking about influence at HR conferences. Like, you know, folks, you need to step up your game. You should be influencing business decisions, not merely reacting to them. And that's kind of where it started. And so where it's gone from there is in working with people and with aspiring leaders to show that regardless of where they're at in their career, where they're at on the company ladder or whatever, that there is a role that influence has to play. If we are going to achieve our dreams, whatever they may be, personally or professionally, usually we need the help of other people in some way, shape, or form, right? And so in order to get there, then we've got to have some type of relationship, perhaps even influence, not over them, but influence to motivate them, if you will. You know, a lot of people think that influence is about manipulating someone. I'm going to try and influence you to buy a car. Okay, that's selling, and selling is influence. Absolutely, right? Buy my car over the other car. But you know, we're also talking about influence as a way to inspire people, as a way to help them to see your vision of how things could be and to hop on the train with you. To me, that's influence. And that's critical for anyone who aspires to lead, not just the leader of a company, but a leader of a department, a leader of a function. Even a frontline supervisor is a leader, right? We don't need a title. So those are the things that I believe make influence so important. And more importantly, why we need to develop our ability to influence others.
That's great. That's very insightful. And for those of you tuning in, or for those of you who are just lurking and haven't said hi yet on the Career Coffee Chat show, or if you're watching the podcast later, please do let me know, what does influence mean to you? Because influence means all different things for everyone. And you had a great analogy earlier. No, it's manipulation. You know, buy my car. Well, not really. And we feel that influence has some sort of, you know, downward force on another persona,
right,
when it actually that's reversed, and it has more of an upward force. And what do I mean by that? Um, the best influencers I know are typically those people who have an elevated know, like, and trust factor. Don't you think, Ed?
Yep, absolutely.
Right. And when I've done work in cultures and as a coach, what I find is you can be a very poignant influencer and not have a title at all.
Absolutely.
Right.
People really want to know three things. But before you can influence them, they want to know if you care about them first and foremost, right? I mean, if it's obvious you don't care, then you are going to have no, I don't want to keep using the term influence, and certainly not power, but you're not going to have the ability to sway their minds if you don't show that you care. The next thing they want to know after that is, can you help them? So once they know that you care, then they want to know kind of what's in it for them. I mean, it's the quintessential human experience. What can you do for me, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We all need mentors, and we need folks around us who are willing to pull us along and share their wisdom. And then finally, the folks need to know from us, can I trust you? Right? So do you care about me? Can you help me? Can I trust you? If you can nail those three things, now you're on your way to being able to use influence with someone to help them grow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can do that at any level. And that's why I shared when I introduced the show. It doesn't matter where you are in your career or life. Now, I want to say hi to you who's tuning in from Germany. She's listening attentively. She said,
"Hey, Germany."
She will be coming up on the Krow Coffee Chat show in a couple of months to share with us about remote work environments, how to thrive. And I want to say hi to Jesse, who says leadership to him, influence to him seems to be a measure of leadership. People follow even without an active control, or for lack of a better word. So it's not really about control. It's not. I'll give you an analogy again. I'll give you a little story. So the most influential person in one of the influential people in our little small community out here in Fayetteville, Texas, outside of Houston, Texas, until very recently, he did pass, has been a person who owned a grass cutting company. He cut grass for a living.
That's right.
That's what he did.
He's done. Yep.
Very influential. Why? Why does someone who mows lawns have such influence over the community? Because of his giving without reserve persona. So he ticked the box on the I care about you, right? What's in it for me? He was always giving to people. And when, by the way, people feel like they're in debt, they may not think of it in that term, but they feel like they are indebted to you, then that gives you the power of reciprocity. There's a lot of power in the power of reciprocity. So people feel like they need to pay off that debt. So let's say you mow their grass for free a couple times, which I do for my neighbor, and he's trying to pay me for a cabinet that I'm like, I'll give it to you. He's like, no, I absolutely will not. Free. I have to pay you. I was like, I don't understand. But it's the law of reciprocity.
Right.
And then, of course, you have the trust factor. Right. And through those things and being a trustworthy person, following up on what you say. So that's my little story.
Yeah. And, Jesse's onto something. You've all probably heard of John Maxwell. He's written just a couple of books about leadership.
One or two.
And he actually has a quote that really, it encapsulates what we're talking about here. And to Jesse's point, he says, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And so the real challenge is if we don't have influence, we really can't be a leader. Now, you can be a leader in title without influence, absolutely. We call that positional leadership. And that comes when you get that promotion at work and you're now director of marketing. Okay, well, people are like, well, okay, so I got to report to this gal and I'll see what's up. And then it goes back to those three things. I'm going to wait and see if she cares about me. I'm going to wait and see if she can help me. And then I'll figure out if I can trust her, right? So that positional leadership only buys us a little bit of time before we can convert that into some level of trust and some level of true influence over our people. Right. And so, when we think about it that way, Yeah, I mean, I probably can't get followers if I don't have influence over anybody. And if I don't have followers, I'm certainly not a leader. I'm just a one-man band, right?
Out
So
there taking a walk.
yeah, I'm out taking a walk. Exactly. Exactly. And so to me, even in your personal life, I think that our listeners today can probably identify with this. I mean, think about how you spend your personal time. Maybe you've got families. Hopefully, your spouse or your children, if you have them, consider you to be a leader in your home. Okay. Maybe you volunteer with scouting organization or a team coach or a band leader, those kinds of things. And you start to think about the influence that you have over some of these kids. Okay. And people will say, oh, but I'm just volunteering, Ed. Yeah, but you're giving back, right? And if you're doing it for truly the giving back and not for some self-serving, oh, my company says I got to be on a board, so I'm going to hop on this board kind of thing, if you're really doing it to give back to your community, give back, in this case, in my example, to kids, I mean, your influence is immeasurable. It really is, because who knows where those kids are going to end up, right? I mean, you may lose track of them in 30 years from now. They're going to be running a company, running our country. Who knows, solving cancer, whatever it happens to be. And so we don't always know those that we have influence over, how that influence is going to play out. And I think that's the awesome power of it. But it's also the thing that can get us in trouble with influence, right? Influence can be used for bad. Think about someone who may check some of those boxes, okay, that they care about me and they're going to help me and I think I can trust them. Okay, so all that means is now I'm in their inner circle. Okay, but we've had leaders across history that have been highly influential people and did despicably evil things. You think about Hitler. Well, people will say, well, Ed, he didn't care about anyone. He cared about his inner circle, right? His tight group, he cared about, right? Mm-hmm. He helped them in terms of power and money and stature, and they did trust him. Okay, so, say what you want about the guy, as bad as he was, he checked those boxes. So he had influence over millions, right? But what did he use it for? So let's not forget that influence in and of itself is only good if it's used to help mentor people and multiply other leaders. That's the key, right? Mm-hmm. A dictator does not multiply other leaders. They actively keep people in check.
Right.
So,
a good question here is that the distinction between influence and manipulation?
Absolutely.
You bring up a good point. I mean, people will say, oh, Adolf Hitler, a bad guy. Yeah, horrible.
Yes.
Horrific. There isn't really even words for it. I mean, it's that traumatic. Hmm? And
I mean,
when you look at his leadership model, while for the wrong reasons, in keying in on people's need for greed, control, power, and fear. You see, and that's where I'd love to go later on in our conversation. Maybe it's the difference between abundance mindset and fear and scarcity mindsets when it comes to influence.
So I mean, to answer the question, absolutely. So there are lots of types of influence, and certainly manipulating is a way to influence someone to get them to act. Remember, influence is getting someone to act in a way that we would like them to act. Okay. And we can think of things like intimidation, right? That's a form of influence. Persuasion, your typical salesman persuading you to buy, X gadget. Okay. There are lots of different ways, right?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But until
you don't do this, you might die, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So until we get to the respect piece, right? That's where true influence for leadership's sake happens. So let's not forget that influence can be used for bad, and I don't certainly preach that. That's not why I think we.
That's more manipulation. I think you're onto something. That's really more manipulation. And we're going to think about influence in its purest form. We're thinking about harm to none, altruistic reasons, giving and helping mentality, what I call pay it forward mentality, and by so doing, and basically practicing what you preach, showing up. If you commit to something, you've committed to it, being a transparent, honest person, your credibility then builds the trust. Of course, the more they get to know you, that's the know factor. And then the caring factor is the fact that you're a pay it forward person and you're there to help people within your boundaries. So here's the thing. A lot of people get off the bus. They're like, oh, okay, all I do is just, give to others. So I'm just going to give. Yeah. Well, yeah.
You have to make sure, not to get off topic, but, giving is good. Okay. Obviously giving is good, but we all have an emotional tank that needs filled. So, leaders can burn out. It's great to be a servant leader. I believe in that trait. However, the relationships have to be also fulfilling for us. So if we have surrounded ourselves with takers who are constantly sucking our energy out simply because of what we can do for them, that's clearly not a healthy relationship. And I'd argue from a business perspective, you're not truly leading them. They're using you, right? And so we all know those types of people who they are a drain to be around because they're sucking the life force out of us. Okay. And I think that from a self-care standpoint, we've got to be cognizant of that.
And as a leader, having those healthy boundaries and establishing expectations. Okay, here's the boundary. This is the allowable interaction, interface, what you can expect from me, etc. And at any level, honestly, when people come to me, they're looking to elevate. If they're already a leader or they're looking to move up in an organization or think about merging into leadership, and it's a big challenge for them to understand. Okay, how do I set boundaries and what does that look like for me, and am I being strategic about what I say yes to? Because when you say yes to one thing, you say no to something else.
Absolutely.
And a big mistake I see of some people who are interested in climbing the ladder, if you will, they say yes to everything because they think, oh, it'll give me visibility. Well, visibility, if done incorrectly, may give you influence, but may not be the kind of influence you want.
Right.
It hurts your brand because then you're known as a person who can't complete, who can't finish things, that credibility factor suffers.
Yeah. And it's hard, especially if we've got some entrepreneurs, listening in. Saying no is hard. And it doesn't get any easier. I mean, I've been doing this consulting thing now for 20 years, and saying no doesn't get easier. Because as I say no now, there's usually more zeros involved than there was 20 years ago, right? And so it's hard to stay focused on the goal. And I know we're getting off the influence thing, but yeah, I mean, you've got to be able to, in order to stay true to yourself and all leader, and actually here's how I want to tie it back in. I mean, all influence, all leadership starts with how we lead ourselves. And so we can't lead others. It's like the old saying, you can't love someone else till you love yourself properly, right? Well, you can't lead others until you lead yourself well. And people say, well, Ed, what does that even mean? And I say, well, think about it this way. So let's say, Aaron, that you promised to do something for me and you don't do it timely. You let me down, okay? I probably hold you to a standard and say, well, she let me down and I can't believe she let me down. Doggone it, And I don't want to listen to any excuse in the book. But if I let you down and I say to myself, well, life got busy and I just didn't have time to get to it. And I kind of let myself off the hook. You see, I'm holding you to a different standard than I hold myself. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about with self-leadership. How do we hold ourselves accountable for the behaviors we want to exhibit to be a leader and to hold ourselves to the things that we promise to others? Okay. That's huge. And I am very disappointed. So for those of you that are listening, Aaron reminded me that I let her down. I promised her a referral to a service provider, and I let her down, and she got the pouty face. And honestly, Aaron, I do. I to me, that's just, it's not cool. We talked about it. I forgot. Now it's written down, so I won't forget. But that's where, to me, I take that seriously, because all we have at the end of the day to offer other folks is our words and backed up by our actions. And so if we can't follow up our words and actions, forget influence, forget leadership, really forget any of that, right? You're never going to build trust.
And I'll caveat that and saying that doesn't mean you can't be human. It's all about how you show up. Yeah. If you show up truth and authentically say, gosh, I screwed up. I feel terrible. I totally forgot, or whatever it was. Unless you continually do this, probably a one-off incident is not going to cancel your ability to be a leader. That's
no, I would agree. We are all human. We all make mistakes.
Too many leaders feel like, I can't be a leader. I can't have influence unless I'm perfect. Well,
no, I mean, you've got to be authentic. Got to be authentic. Yeah. And I was having a discussion with someone the other day about, leading in a crisis. And they asked me, and I didn't want to go down the political road, with the example, but they asked, well, what about the political leadership that we've had during the pandemic? And I said, well, if you take out, forget left, right, any of that stuff, and just look at it from a leadership perspective, what do we want out of our leaders, right? Political, religious, faith-based, whoever, right? We want to trust them, right? We want to know if they actually care about us, and we want to know what they're going to do for us, right? Now, those three things that we've talked about already, here are the challenges with that on a massive scale. So you can only be a model to the masses. You can only model the right behaviors. To influence, you've got to influence on an individual level. So if we're thinking that our politicians or our faith leaders or whatever are going to be able to be influential because of their position, go back to what we talked about with positional leadership, right? It's only as good as what have you done for me lately, okay? And so we've got to build the building blocks with individuals before we can influence the masses and get to that 15,000 people that we're going to influence in our lifetime. And so those individual connections cannot be underestimated.
Absolutely.
And and that's where we're at in society today, is with a lot of our public figures, we don't know if we can trust them. We don't know if we can trust talking heads. We don't know. And it shouldn't be a surprise to us. Again, I'm not making a political statement one side or the other. I'm just saying in general, this should not be a surprise because trust happens on an individual level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're right. Yes, it does. Absolutely. So, and for those people who may be tuning in or listening later or listening to the podcast, let's just say I'm a very reserved person, very introverted. I cannot stand networking events. Don't even ask me about that. I'm pretty quiet. I, do my work. I'm diligent. Few people know me, but I'm not like a social butterfly by any stretch. I don't feel like I have influence. Is that true?
Not true. Not true. I am an introvert. I'm not a raging introvert. I'm not a wallflower. But folks need to remember, what it means to be an extrovert versus an introvert. And it's where you get your energy from, right? I can have these sorts of chats, it doesn't suck energy out of me. I do a lot of public speaking at conferences. And when I step off that stage, I'm drained. Right? Because I'm giving so much energy. Okay. That's the sign of an introvert. So like you, I would prefer, as much as I can talk to people and I'm pretty at ease, I don't like to go to networking events either. Right. Unless I know I'm going to know somebody there. And again, that's the mark of an introvert. And so that doesn't mean you can't be influential. And it certainly doesn't mean that you can't be a leader. We're starting to see some pretty good research come out that maybe introverts make better leaders. Why? Because we're a little more introspective, right? We're a little bit more, I hate to say reserved, but reserved in our thinking. We like to reflect on things. We like to take in. We like to listen. We like to observe. We're good people watchers. And so there's something to be said for that. And influence doesn't happen just because of your words, right? It's your actions. So that so-called quiet and shy person over in the corner, really we should be watching what they're doing, not necessarily what they're saying. And that's where you get those informal influencers. So, if we've got folks that are listening that have people responsibilities in their workplaces, look for those, we call those peer level influencers. Who are the folks that other people seem to look at and watch? And again, doesn't have to be, a shift leader, doesn't have to be a union shop steward or anything like that. It's just someone that they watch, and wherever that person goes, they go. Okay. Those are the types of people who have influence.
Right.
And in my experience, some of those folks are not the most outspoken. In fact, sometimes they're the quietest people, but they do their job in a way that exudes a confidence and an aura about them that people say, I need to pay attention to that person over there.
Right. Absolutely. If you identify with being more reserved, and I'm an ambivert, so depends on the day whether I get drained or not. But I'm like you, and sometimes I can walk away from a speaking event. I'm like, yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I need a nap. So I'm right in the middle. But if you identify with being more reserved, it has no bearing on your ability to influence others. Absolutely none.
None.
In fact, it's highly more likely that you develop deeper, more meaningful relationships.
It's true.
The only consideration you might want to think about is to break down your barriers, if you have any, between developing broader ties and being more comfortable with developing broader ties and allowing yourself that space and grace. Right. Because we don't want to just rely on just a few people. We want other people to know us. So think about what's comfortable for you as far as expanding that influence.
Yeah.
And maybe you like to write, you want to write blogs, thought leadership pieces in your industry or whatever that looks like. That is also influential, particularly if you're doing it from a help-focused, I am helping, adding value, a value-focused perspective. Because I know that actually helped me land several leadership positions in my corporate career.
Yeah.
Because I became more known in that space. So you actually has another piece of wonderful wisdom here. Let's see if I can encapsulate this correctly. She said, reflecting on leaders that influenced me in my career when I was an employee in the corporate world were actually leaders who probably didn't intentionally do things to influence me. So they weren't intentional. They're like, oh, let me go out here and influence you. Yeah. They did things that resonated with me and my values. And I think that's what made an impact on me. And so they therefore influenced me. Does that make sense?
It's an awesome statement, because a person's influence comes from their ability to add value to another person. So clearly what we're hearing is that your listener had a lot of opportunity to interact with leaders who added value back. And that's the key, right? Is that adding value back to others. It goes back to that, who's sucking the life out of you and who's refilling your tank up. We all have those people that we walk away from going, gosh, they're a great person. I feel so good when I'm around them. There's a value add there. And the value add can be, how do you make me feel? How are you helping me develop? How are you helping me solve a problem? Are you just making me smile when I need a smile, right? That's right. So adding value can mean a lot of different things based on the scenario and the lens through which that recipient of the value needs it at any point in time. And so, I don't think that, I think one of the questions we have to ask ourselves as leaders really is, why do I want to be an influencer? What's my end game here? Because if you can answer that, now you can decide what's the path you need to take with your influence. If it's world domination, okay, well, that's a whole different path than, I'm trying to build a company and I want to influence people because I want them to see the vision that I have for this company. I want them to be a part of it. And I want them to be fired up so that I have the best talent working for me. Okay. Those are two different paths. Both are attainable, but it's going to take different types of value adding, okay, to make it happen. And so when I think about the clients that I've worked with that have done it well, their workplace culture and the environment was one of, I'm going to challenge you and I'm going to hold you accountable, but I'm also going to give you all the tools you need to be successful. And not just physical tools and not just budgets, but the resource of my time as a leader and a mentor, or the resource of being in that network group or that referral group or getting you a really good executive coach, whatever it happens to be. I mean, those are the ties that bind when you're talking about getting people behind you and in a shared vision and truly adding value to them. Yeah. And, I think what we're seeing today is as companies are wrestling with, what do we want to do with bringing people back to the office right now? Okay. And it disappoints me that so many companies are going with this all or nothing approach. Yes. Well, you just had people work at home and be productive for 18 months. And now you're going to tell them, oh, well, that's no good. You got to come back. Okay.
And that's why we're seeing the Great Resignation.
Right. And so what's happening is the message that we're sending is we don't trust you. Well, we trusted you when we had to, but now that we don't have to trust you, we're not going to trust you anymore.
Conditional trust.
And it's a shame because I'm working with one company's coming to mind right now, and the chief executive, great guy, love his vision, love the way he's fired up his workforce. But he's making some decisions now that are going to have massive negative impacts on the culture unless we can get them reversed. And that's just one of them. That's just one of the examples that's fresh in my mind.
I mean, the leaders I coach, we're seeing massive attrition, particularly around workplaces that demand, now you have to be. It was okay for a while, we put up with it, but now you have to be in the office. And people are like, no, I did this job just fine in their minds. For a year or more. And now you want me to change? Some people are quitting without having another opportunity here in the US. So we're seeing what's called the Great Resignation. And a lot of that is because of these decisions that leaders are making.
Yeah. One of the last live speaking gigs I did before the lockdown started, I was down in Louisiana at their state SHRM conference. And we were talking about HR strategy. And one of the pieces that we got to talking about was this idea of telework and remote work. And, I recall one of the ladies in the front row, she raised her hand. She said, Ed, I will never support remote work. And I said, well, why not? I bet she's changed her tune now. But I said, why not? Excuse me. And she says, because I don't know if those people are actually working. And I said, okay, so I'm going to, I'm always up for a good challenge. I'm a bit of an instigator. My wife will tell you that. But so I said, okay, so let's delve into this for a moment. So in HR, do you handle the hiring? She says, yes. I said, do you have final say? She goes, yes, with the hiring manager that we both decide. I said, okay. So what you're telling me then is that you have intentionally hired people that you can't trust to do the job. And a hush falls over the crowd, right? She had no response. And so, that's my challenge for HR. Circling back to you asked me about where I start with influence. I mean, to me, that's a horribly short-sighted piece. Now, that was 2 years ago. I'd love to track that lady down now. Maybe I need to go back to the video and see if I can find out who she is and say, hey, what do you think in these days? I've worked remotely for 20 years now. And people say, oh, yeah, but you're a sole prop. Well, so? I mean, I can remember when I started out working from home, and I was at a networking event out of my local town and met another HR consultant. And he told me two things that have stuck with me today and have been driving forces for me. One, now 20 years ago, my hair was still dark brown. Okay. And he said to me, Ed, you don't have enough of this. And he pointed to his gray hair. Like, okay, so what is that supposed to mean? Right? Like I hadn't earned my chops yet or something. But the other thing he said to me was, you're never going to get taken seriously as long as you're working from home. Now, I didn't believe him then. I certainly don't believe him now, but I've carried that chip on my shoulder, right? That who cares where I've always been a proponent. Who cares where you work from? Am I the best person to help you?
Very dated, very outmoded, very outdated control, fear, and scarcity based mindset.
Yeah.
Which brings me to our next part of our show before we wrap up. But I want to touch base with Gerald's insight here, because he did pose a really good question for us. Can you take care of your career from home without some kind of face-to-face networking interaction? I propose that you can in balance. Okay. Take Dropbox, for example. Now, granted, they're a tech company, they're San Francisco based, and they've gone to the virtual first methodology.
Mm-hmm.
And they have redesigned everything. They've thrown out the window offices. So there's no offices for you to come
Right.
into because they know that their people can do great jobs remotely.
Mm-hmm.
And they've developed a space for people to touch point. So it's a touch point space. You need to have an in-person meeting. Great. We have space for that. You need to touch base with somebody one day a week or once a month. Great. We have a space for that. But you don't have to be there all the time. And I feel like because I've noticed this from a sociological behavioral science standpoint, we really struggle for balance in our societies. We really do. It's like over here or over here. Whether it's political, religion, anything, we're like extreme central. And I'm not sure why, because most answers are found in the balance.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's true. And I think, yes, you can. Is it maybe a little more challenging? Perhaps it requires a little bit more effort. However, I would also say it could be helpful. And here's why. We all have bad days, right? If you're having a bad day working from home, who knows, right? Maybe the dog or your spouse, if they're also working from home. But you can have a bad day and maybe you get away with it. You have a bad day at the office and you upset the wrong person. Just because you're having a bad day, what happens, right? So, I think that we always think, oh, I'm missing out on the opportunity to build connections and hurrah, and go to coffee and talk at the water cooler. Yeah, absolutely. But you're also insulating yourself from those times when you're not at your best. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the positive side of this, is that where are you at your best? So if you are at your best in the office and your company is welcoming people back to the office, then get back to the office. If it's some sort of hybrid approach for you, that's what's best for you, and your company's willing to do that, make it happen, right? So because I believe that the light is going to shine through. Your light will shine through when you're at your best.
Right.
So figure out where you're at your best and be your best. Right? Mm-hmm. I know there's office politics and there's, the shaking of hands and the kissing of babies that needs to happen to get ahead. But the reality is the majority of it is no one's going to care that you shook their hand if your work output is subpar and you don't know how to talk to people even through a Zoom relationship. So
right.
That's my 2 cents on that. And I'm sure we'd find some people that would disagree with us, but I don't, when the pandemic started, as a member of the National Speakers Association, all I heard was, "Oh, live speaking's done. It's never coming back." Like, what are you people smoking?
I heard the same thing, and it's to be fair, yes, a lot of people that's where their brilliance. They showed up in person, and that was their brilliance, and they were just devastated. And I get it. However, I was also the first person to go. I was contacting my local professional organizations. I used to speak in person. I was, okay, we're going virtual. Let's do this. And I would be the guinea pig. And sometimes it didn't go very well because we didn't know what we were doing back in March.
Technology doesn't work. And
but we figured it out. And I got them virtual. And, that's the thing. It's knowing where you show up the best, being able to manage that and being agile in the moment. Mm-hmm. It's not a black and white all or nothing. It never is a black and white all or nothing answer.
No.
But so I want to touch on several key points before we wrap up the show because we've had a great conversation. I've had a lot of fun. I don't know about you, but thank you for all of you tuned in and ask your questions, giving us your insights, and please don't be shy if you're still waiting out there in the wings, not quite sure if you want to ask your question or not. And feel free to DM either one of us, and just know that also you're welcome to share the replay for this or the Coffee Cat podcast. If you're watching the podcast, please give us a thumbs up or a star rating. We appreciate that. I want to touch on a couple things. Influencing up and fear and scarcity versus abundance mindsets when it comes to influence. Yeah. Which one do you want to tackle first?
Let's do scarcity mindset.
All right. Let's do it. I'm excited because I've really been focusing on this lately. And one of the reasons why I love my mother dearly. She's recently moved near to us, and I
Mhm.
realized that her structure is based on fear and scarcity. And because that's been like shoved in my face again. I was like, now I'm to deal with it. I'm also showing it to her, and now she's recognizing things. So it's very interesting how that's unfolding, and how much our society, our familiar structures, everything creates an unconscious fear and scarcity bias.
Yes. So here's the thing. You can put yourself out there and say, okay, I don't want to help anybody else. I just want to help me. And I want you to think about that mentality, because that's the fear and scarcity mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to look out for numero uno.
I'm afraid to share it with anybody else because
that's right.
I need this.
There's no room. Now, if you agree in my statement at the top of the show that in order to get anything done, we need others around us, okay? By pushing others away, we are limiting our potential. And I can tell you, one of my best referral partners, I mean, this woman has given me tens of thousands of dollars of business over the course of our relationship together. She's another HR consultant. Now people say, oh my gosh, Ed, but don't you guys overlap? No. And we recognize that early on. The things that are in my wheelhouse are not in hers, and vice versa. And what has become beautiful is I've been able to refer back to her. She's referred to me. Both our practices are growing and thriving. And yet on the surface, you would go, huh, they're about 90% the same. Maybe, but that 10% is where the magic is, right? And so I've never been one to outwardly embrace the fear and scarcity. I would be lying if I didn't say the little bird on my shoulder sometimes doesn't chirp in and say, hey, dude, there's not enough to go around, so watch what you're doing, okay? That's there. That little gremlin pops up every now and then, okay? And I got to smack him and say, look, not only am I blessed in what I've been able to do for people, but I continue to see that I used to have this mindset of I keep giving, and nothing comes back to me. I'm tired of it.
Well, if you have that mindset, guess what?
Exactly, right? And I did. I mean, I served on boards and committees, and I gave them my time, and I just felt like, where's come on, universe, hook me up, It wasn't until I really started to spend some time focusing every day on the things that I was grateful for did I realize, wait a minute, the universe is hooking you up pretty good here, pal. Okay. And so in order to be able to be influential for others and to care about others, we need to take a step back and say, okay, what do we have to be grateful for? What is going really well for us right now? Okay. And once you realize that the things that are going well for you probably had something to do with someone else's involvement in your life, you start to realize that you need other people. And the more other quality people you can surround yourself with, the better off you are going to be, regardless of the stage of your life, your career, or whatever. So yeah, do I struggle with that mentality every now and then? Absolutely. I think it'd be almost inhuman not to. But I go back to my gratitude exercise and really being focused on, okay, I just landed a big client. Yay. Well, where did that come from? Oh, someone knew someone who knew someone who said, gotta talk to Ed.
It circles back to influence.
Yeah.
Circles back to a value-driven first mentality. Can I give value? And can I do so from a space of abundance? Because I also have one closing story. Young lady I know, she influenced others because it came from a fear and scarcity perspective, because she didn't feel like she had enough, or she wanted more, and had to be reciprocal. It wasn't just happenstance because that's the way it is. It had to be reciprocal. And she would, like, for example, she gave someone a piece of jewelry once, just hoping that they would back
They would
her
give her
up
something
in
back.
this movement she was going to do, and this process she was going to propose,
Okay.
or whatever. And yeah, so it imploded badly. And now she's shifted gears and she's changed to doing a lot of deep work. But
Okay.
she had to realize that because she was approaching it from the fear and scarcity mindset, that she was creating more fear and scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
When you approach it from abundance mindset, a gratitude mindset, that's where true, beautiful influence happens, because you're not sabotaging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And please don't be too hard on yourself, because we are very programmed from childhood to be this fear and scarcity model.
Mm-hmm.
And it will take some work, unlearning and relearning. I know
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a process.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a process, but it's so rewarding, because it's interesting. We focus so much time on what we don't want. And really, we need to be focusing on what we do want in this life and our careers or what have you. So, Ed, it's been a deep pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
And I know that it's been a lot of fun having all of you tune in, ask your questions, give us your insights. Thank you so much for your participation. We love having you on the show. And for those of you watching the replay or listening to the podcast later, don't be shy. Reach out. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us.
Absolutely.
Ed has some great materials here I would like to share with you. You can find out more about him at edkrow.com. Mm-hmm. And of course, look in the show notes. He's also got a discounted access to his book, which is highly worthwhile. I recommend you checking that out as well. So again, Ed, it's been a deep pleasure. Thank you for being on the show. Thank all of you for tuning in. And until next time, my friends, keep elevating.
Thanks, Aaron.